I'll wait about 2 more minutes and then I will get started with this morning's first presentation. I'll just wait a couple more minutes in case anyone is taking advantage of their little break. All right, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Zebarth. I am the elementary school principal in the Cambridge-Isani School District. I am lucky enough to be the principal of 2 schools that are housed in one building. Isani Intermediate School, which is a grades 3, 4, 5 elementary school, and School for All Seasons, which is a K-5 flexible learning year program. And our flexible learning year school on a normal time period, obviously we're not living in normal times, but in a normal time period, that school usually begins around the 1st of August. And so our PBIS journey, which is going to be the topic of this presentation, started with our participation in a Minnesota Department of Education, Minnesota PBIS cohort. And I'll talk a little bit about that aspect of our PBIS journey. And then I'll touch a little bit on how we as a district were able to get all of our schools on the PBIS journey all at the same time. So we did a couple of things unique in our district, and that will be the topic of today's conversation. So again, the intent of this presentation is to just share some information about our school and our PBIS journey, and also hopefully along the way give you some information just about PBIS if your school district, your school is interested in participating and joining one of the cohorts. All right. So let's see here. Okay, there we go. So hello, this is the picture of our group that is part of our PBIS team. And so the first thing to know as you plan your PBIS program for your school is that all PBIS teams should be comprised and be representative of people from all parts of your building. And so this is a picture of our PBIS team, and our PBIS team is representative of each grade level, each wing, all of our specialists, our guidance counselor, our academic coach, as well. So it is a team effort, and that is an important part of it, is to make sure that your teams are representative of your school community. Some basics about PBIS will be next. The next few slides come from our North Region Coordinator, Aaron Agnes. One thing that you should know about PBIS in Minnesota is divided into 3 regions. The Metro, which covers obviously the metropolitan area of Minneapolis and St. Paul and the surrounding suburbs. There's a South section, which covers that area to the south, east, and west of Minneapolis, St. Paul. And then pretty much everything north of Minneapolis, St. Paul, in northwest, northeast, north central, all of those regions are in our region, which is considered north. So the next few slides are taken from previous presentations, which I've also been lucky enough to attend by our coordinator, Erin Agnes. So there are 3 coordinators in Minnesota. Each of those coordinators are responsible for a region. So Erin Agnes, who happens to also be a parent in our, has 2 children in our school district, one in my building and one in the primary school in Isani, is the person who is our coordinator. So basically, the first step in PBIS is that it is a tier 1 system. Your first focus in developing a PBIS system for your school is to develop routines, procedures, and expectations for all of your students. And so it doesn't matter what the student, who the students are, where they're at, what grade level they're at. If they attend your school, then there are a set of common expectations for all of your common areas, as well as your classrooms, that you as a team and as a faculty will develop. And along the way, it is important to remember things like the cafeteria to include your food service staff, playground to include your playground staff, your bathrooms and other parts of your building, including the custodial staff. So that is for tier 1, that is for everyone. And then through data collection, if you have some students that need some extra supports, that would be for your tier 2, which would be more targeted interventions. And then for the small number of students that are really struggling, that would be your tier 3 interventions. And so much of what we'll be talking about today will be looking at our tier 1, which is for the majority of the students in our schools. So why would a school be interested in PBIS? The fundamental purpose of school-wide PBS, making sure schools are effective and equitable learning environments for all students. One of the things I shared with our staff is that we as educators sometimes make assumptions about children. And one of the assumptions we make is that all students know what is expected in this thing called school. And so one of the things that I asked my staff to do was to get rid of that bias or those assumptions that they have about what children come to them knowing. And so what we did is, how can we create predictable, consistent, positive, and safe expectations for all students so that what is expected of them at school is explicitly stated and explicitly taught. And then once those things have been stated and taught, then we can begin to move to the next step. So the first step is to explicitly teach all students what you expect in all areas of your building and in the classroom, and what your expectations are for students. It's a multi-tiered framework, as I showed you in an earlier slide. There's basically there are 3 levels, and it really is establishing the social culture and supports that help all students be successful. The purpose of PBIS is, again, as I stated earlier, is to have clearly defined expectations for all students, to explicitly teach those expectations, and also to have signs and reminders and programs in place to help students know what is expected. And really, the purpose behind school-wide PBIS is obviously prevention. Once people understand what's expected of them, we base on the assumption that at least 80% of our students should be able to follow those expectations on a regular basis. It also helps us define as a staff what we expect of our students so that we have clear and consistent expectations throughout the building. It also then kind of changes the conversation to more of a positive way instead of a negative way. So instead of, for example, saying, don't run in the hallway, we might say, remember your Bluejacket pride expectations in the hallway. When we show Bluejacket pride in the hallway, we walk on the right side of the hallway with our hands at our side facing forward. And it just changes the conversation and the tone. And it does set a much better social culture in your building when you do that. It also allows us then to be more consistent with our consequences. So if his child continues to struggle with the expectations and you've retaught them a number of times, then you begin to look into, like I showed earlier, tier 2, where you might have some more targeted interventions. And that might be as a school where you might use people like your school social worker or your school guidance counselor to develop some kind of interventions, or other people on your team, classroom teachers, specialists, other people who maybe have a significant role in a child's life can be part of that aspect of it. The other thing that's been really helpful for us as a school is that with PBIS, we are much more data focused, and we look at our data on a monthly basis as a team. We share that with our staff. We collect data on all student behavior referrals, or ODRs, office disciplinary referrals. And we look at those that are considered major and those that are considered minor. And one thing that we've added to that is we also print out the number of students each month that have 0 referrals, and with our goal being that 80% of our students by the end of the year would have 0 referrals, and or 0 or 1 referral. The goal would be to try to get as many students as possible to not have referrals. And what we've learned in that process is that the more that we can clearly define what's expected, the less time we are spending with behavior challenges that maybe are more directly related to this confusion about expectations. So again, part of the beauty of PBIS is it does clearly, you as a team clearly define your expectations so that all students are as some people have told me, they're insanely clear about what's expected in their school. So again, this is just a graphic to kind of show you the goals to improve classroom and school climate, integrating academic and behavior initiatives, anything that you're doing. It also, we have found it really improves support for students that have emotional and behavioral disorders, because they are taught some clearly defined expectations. And then when they're not able to meet those, then we can move right to a tier 2 intervention. And have clearly defined measurements for that. And then we can move right into a tier 3 if we need to. It also decreases the amount of reactivity, where you're constantly reacting to things, and hopefully maximizing academic achievement because students are in the classroom more. Another thing is, what is PBIS? So again, just to give you a quick definition, it basically involves staff that are culturally knowledgeable. It involves culturally relevant and effective instruction, culturally valid information for decisions. That's where your data comes in. And then equitable academic and social behavior expectations. So everyone is expected to do the same things. And they're all taught that. And it creates an atmosphere where people feel really safe because they know what is expected. So again, most of our PBIS efforts are universal targets for all of our students. And then those that have demonstrated some needs for further supports, we can do a tier 2, which would be the sum, and then provide intensive for a few. So the idea being that if you do your systems correctly, you should have enough staff support to help those who need more intensive or targeted interventions. I remember back before we began our PBIS journey that it seemed like we had so many students that were being sent to our student resource room. It was difficult to manage, but once we began to more clearly explain and articulate and be more explicit about what our expectations are, we found that we had more time then, as the numbers of students decreased who were not able to meet the expectations. we were then able to use the staffing we had to better meet their needs. So again, classroom. So the areas that we focus on, and all PBIS schools focus on, is what's in the classroom, outside of the classroom, and then the student and the family. And so the intersection of all of them is where it's important. Is every school kind of has a theme or kind of an acronym. And so for ours, it's Bluejacket Pride. Our school mascot is the Bluejacket, and it's never been quite clearly defined what a Bluejacket is in our school, but we are Bluejackets, and so we have Bluejacket Pride, and we explicitly teach our students what Bluejacket Pride looks like in the classroom, in our school, in our community, and at home. And so one of the things that was nice about having the PBIS program is we were then able to go right into distance learning and say, now what does it look like to show Bluejacket Pride when we can't be at school, and to continue those conversations. Some common misconceptions about PBIS that I hear from a lot of schools that are thinking about PBIS, and then or principals, and they say, yeah, but you know, Mark, it's only about rewards, and it's just giving kids rewards for doing what they should be doing. And you know, they should be internally motivated. They shouldn't need external things. Other people will tell me, well, it's just a packaged curriculum. You go buy it somewhere, and then, you know, who's going to teach it? Other people will say, well, it's only for students who struggle. It shouldn't be for all students, because most students, you know, they do what's expected. Some people think, well, we just have a PBIS training and in the fall and we're good. And other people say, well, we had a problem with, you know, kids running in the hallway, so we're going to do PBIS to fix that. And it is not a quick fix. It is a systemic program where you change kind of the thinking in your building to more of a explicit teaching and common set of expectations that all staff are aware of and all students and families are aware of. So let's start for us. We, as a team, made the decision and 10 years ago to begin our journey. And so we were accepted to cohort 6. The way the cohort model works is the Minnesota Department of Education will send out to all principals information about participating in a yearly cohort. And the cohort then will bring schools together that are part of that cohort for training. And so in year 1, there are 3 2-day sessions. And then year 2, there are 3 1-day sessions. And so the idea behind the cohort model is to train groups of schools, have them together. But I will say, and I will speak very highly of this, is the beauty of cohort model is there were other schools that were there that we could talk to not only during our training, but I could call the principal and say, hey, how are you handling this? Or how is this going for you? Or what are you doing in this area? And so it provides a support system for the school and your building as you are going through the process. But the cohort model is the most common way in Minnesota that schools have been trained. And so again, I mentioned all 3 regions. So all 3 regions each year accept cohorts, and then there are trainings held throughout their region. So for example, for us being in the north, we trained in St. Cloud. We had some trainings in Grand Rapids, and we had some trainings in Detroit Lakes. Much of the training for us, luckily, was in the St. Cloud area. We also had some training in Brainerd as well. So it gives you kind of an idea of the regions and how that process works. School-wide PBIS training, this map is a little bit old, so there's a lot more color on the map now. But this just gives you an idea of kind of where people are at in Minnesota with PBIS. And so there's 9 training days over 2 years. It's team-based implementation. The idea behind it is to train a team of people, not only to train the team on what PBIS is, but it also to have that team then be that support system when you get back to your building, to be the cheerleaders and to work through some of the problems that may be inherent in your system, any questions, with the training that they've had. And then because you go back a couple of different times throughout the year, then you can bring up problems and you can bring up challenges and you can bring up successes, and then you can share with others, and then others can share, this is what we did to solve it. So again, it's a support network. And that is one of the reasons why it continues to grow. And if your district is not a PBIS school, I would definitely obviously recommend it. And especially if you are a principal, because it is a way to really help clarify the expectations in your building and to develop community. So again, the purpose behind school-wide PBIS training is to build capacity, skills, competency, and beliefs amongst the people in the training so that they can go back to their schools and make a difference. So the timeline of events for us is that we started in 2009 to apply. We began our training in 2010, 11 and 11, 12. And then starting in 2013, we have been what is called sustaining, which means that as part of the PBIS world is you not only do you collect data about your students, but you collect data about your PBIS team and your school. And there's a couple of different things that you can do. One of the things that we do is a TFI, and the tiered fidelity instrument is basically an instrument that measures how you are doing in terms of maintaining the fidelity to the PBIS program. And by doing that, you are then looking at your school. And one of the things that continues to amaze us every year is that there are some areas that we are really hitting it, just doing great. And then there are areas where we're like, well, we kind of slipped a little bit. And so then those become the areas of focus, which is the absolute beauty of the tiered fidelity inventory or instrument, is the fact that it really does help key in on areas maybe that you need to work. Because like I said, it's never, there's not an ending point to it. And I think that's a really common misperception. Really what it is the journey. And the data collection is a way to do that. So for example, as a school, once you collect the data, if you find that you're not communicating enough to parents, maybe they don't understand it, then that becomes a focus for the next year. So sustaining PBIS, that is one of the things that we learned in our cohort is that there's a lot of excitement like there is with any initiative. And the hard part in sustaining it is that it has to become embedded into your school community. Once it becomes embedded into your school community, then it is not, it's not reliant on, well, if, for example, in our building, Susan Nelson, back in 2010, Susan was very, very excited about PBIS, and Susan left us. But the nice thing is that because we had embedded it into our system, even though the person who brought the interest and the enthusiasm for the program left, because we had embedded it into our culture, it was able to continue. And about half, I would say, between half and 2/3 of our PBIS team has turned over. And as a result of that, every time we get new people, we train them and we go through the process. So it is important to sustain it. And to all people, it's a matter of looking at your data, measuring it. Are you doing what you want to do? If you're not, how are you going to change it? And so it's a great process. It's a great circular kind of process, or a square process, as you see here. And figure it out. So what I really like about the PBIS program is it does help us, through the use of data collection, determine where we need to focus our attention. Because again, we can't focus our attention on everything. We need to focus our attention on the areas that data tells us we need to focus. It makes us a much more effective team. So it's kind of like riding a bicycle. In order to keep balance, you just keep moving. And so one of the things we learned is that sometimes we, things don't go as well as we would like, or we get data maybe that shows we need to do something different. And so we just have to keep moving forward. So one of the things that happens in PBIS is you're asked to develop a set of matrices. And these are basically your common expectations that you have in various parts of your building and what is expected. And so it contains 3 to 5 positively stated rules or expectations that support the school's mission or purpose. A lot of schools in PBIS will use the respect. And so, for example, respect others, respect yourself, respect property. And this applies to all students and staff members attending. So basically, it's putting things in positive. Kind of a side note, but one of the things that it took me about 3 years after we came back from cohort training to convince our transportation department to change the expectations on the bus, because everything was stated in a negative way. And after 3 years of working with the other principals in our building, we did change that. And it has made a complete difference. Instead of don't do this, don't do that, it was this is what Bluejackets do on the bus. And so again, it's positively stated and then taught. So this was our very first matrix that we created. We looked at, for us, entering and exiting the building and then the classroom. And so, for example, I will respect myself when I enter and exit the building by moving slowly and safely, going directly to my destination. So you can kind of see how we did that. This was one of the artifacts from our cohort training way back a decade ago. And so one of the other things that we did is we kind of came up with an acronym, and everyone kind of has their own acronym. And so one of what we came up with is PRIDE. And so we came up with practicing respect in daily education because that's what we came up with. There's no magic to that. But what we did is then we put those signs up and we added Bluejacket PRIDE. So everyone can kind of describe it. They know what it is. And then that's what the acronym meant. And then we also incorporated as a district and as a building our character traits. So Cambridge Isani Schools in the year between 2000 and 2005 had a task force that got together of community members, and they developed a set of character traits that they would like all graduates of Cambridge Isani Schools to have in their back pocket. And those were honesty, respect, responsibility, self-discipline, and compassion. So after we were trained for our cohort, and as that became more of something that our district was interested in, we also have kind of shifted to focusing also on honesty, respect, responsibility, self-discipline, and compassion when we develop our expectations for students in our school. So these are some examples of some of the signage that we would put in our hallway. So I show Bluejacket PRIDE in our hallways by going directly to where I need to go, having my voice off, walking on the right side of the hall stairway with quiet feet, having my hands by my side, encouraging others to make good choices. And so again, all of the expectations are stated very explicitly. They're very measurable, and they also are very positive. And so those are all attributes that are really, really important in those matrices. And then the other thing is that they're posted all over the building. So again, students have them for reminders, because again, one of the things we found is staff are like, okay, we taught them, now they should know them. And the next step in it is also to make sure that you have them visible throughout as reminders for everyone, and especially if you have visitors. And so by the entrance of our building, we have a bulletin board that has some of our Bluejacket PRIDE expectations. So we have copies of all of the matrices, as well as above and below the line behavior expectations. That's the document there that you see that's green, yellow, and red. And so what we've done is had those stated. So all of our expectations are stated in one common area. The other thing is we did finally figure out after a while that our school was named the Bluejackets because a businessman in town donated Bluejackets to the football team in like 1918. But we also found out that Bluejackets also are related to people who work on ships. And it is a term that's kind of related to nautical crews. And so we did adopt kind of that nautical theme with ours. And so that's why you see the anchors there, in case you're wondering what on earth those are all about. So here's an expectation that we did for the bathrooms. One of the things that was interesting is when we first started is that I would get, as principal, very frequent communication about the state of our bathrooms. and that they were left in rather untidy conditions. And so one of the things that we did is we trained all of our students on what we expect in the bathroom. And the other thing that we did along with that, kind of getting into the whole rewards, is that we created the golden plunger. We just took a toilet plunger, we painted it, spray painted it gold, and then whichever grade level or wing had the cleanest bathrooms that week, they were awarded the golden plunger. And it just became something that students got excited about, but it was also a very inexpensive thing for us to do. But it also allowed us to then have our custodians involved in our program, because they would be the judges of the cleanest bathrooms. And then we did the same thing in transportation. Is we created Bluejacket Pride when on the bus. And when our school district became a PBIS school district, we developed these for everybody, all K through 12. And this has become really important because our bus drivers also are recognizing and rewarding students who demonstrate these expectations on our school bus. And then we also involved our food service, and it just stated what our expectations were in the cafeteria, so that the people who supervise the cafeteria and feed our students know what's expected, and also can recognize and reward students. So for example, it is always awesome when I hear some of our food service say, I really thank you for lining up neatly when you are waiting in line. I really appreciate it. It makes it so much easier for me to do my job. I really, really appreciate it. And to hear those kinds of comments day after day is very affirming. Entering and exiting the building was another area we created some expectations for, again, to make sure that people knew what was expected when they came in and left our buildings each day. As you can imagine, we are a bus transfer point for our district. So we have about 1,800 students that transfer buses at our school site. And we have 600 students who all get off buses at the same time and come directly into our building. And so we learned very quickly that it was important to make sure students knew how to enter and exit the buildings safely. We also did this in the hallway. We created a couple of videos, again, to demonstrate this. This was the area that was our quick win when we were in cohort 6, is we started immediately focusing on the hallways, because that was recognized by staff as an area that we should focus first on. So that was the area we focused on first. And that was how we got our quick win for PBIS, is people noticed almost immediately how the atmosphere in the hallways had improved. And as a result of that, it was much easier to get staff a buy-in. Just a quick note, when we started our cohort, one of the expectations is that at least 80% of your staff are on board with the PBIS concept, because you want to have that very strong majority, because for some people it is going to be requiring them to maybe think a little bit differently. So an important attribute as well. And so the area that our staff identified as a need was the hallway. So that was the focus. And like I said, that quick win helped us. And then we also did it for the office, and we did it for the playground as well. And again, just to help our recess supervisors, hey, thanks for staying within the playground area today. Hey, thanks for being kind to others. Hey, do you have appropriate clothing for the weather today? Are you responsible? Are you being responsible for your belongings? Hey, thanks for lining up neatly and on time, so we're able to get in and out of recess in a timely manner. We really appreciate that. And then we also included our specialists in this. So that would be gym, music, art, media, etc., just to make sure that they were also included and that we had set up expectations for them. And so we also created a classroom matrix to kind of blend responsive classroom, which is something that was we had done some training on with staff. And so a lot of staff were using the responsive classroom. And we have mixed rule creation, and we have teachers at the beginning of the year kind of come up with their own. And so as a class, they commit to showing Bluejacket Pride by how are they going to demonstrate honesty, respect, responsibility, discipline and compassion in their classrooms. So this is just an example of how you can have all of your teachers create a classroom matrix that is inclusive of your PBIS program, but also can be individualized for those classrooms. So for example, if you were in a middle school or a high school, the classroom matrix might look different in a science classroom, for example, versus a social studies classroom. So the next big thing with us in PBIS was being consumers and users of data, and also collectors. And so office discipline referrals became our focus point as far as collecting data and then interpreting it and then using it to make decisions. And so in 2016, we came up with a list of behaviors that were considered minor, because with office discipline referrals, you want major things and you want minor behaviors. So you can begin to kind of separate them. And so minor behaviors are behaviors that will be managed by teachers or by staff that are in those areas. And it also just clarifies what is considered major versus minor, because I'm not sure if this happens in your school, but in our school, when everything's major, it gets really, really challenging when you have all behaviors being considered major and having staff time being used, principals' time, counselors' time on things that could be managed in the classroom equally and probably more effectively. Then we also focused on major behaviors in 2016. And so these were some of the things, and again, these are behaviors that then we felt needed an intervention. They continue to be updated each year depending upon the needs of our school. But these are the things that we've been kind of focusing on as major things in our school. And then we created kind of a above the line, below the line. And so what we do is when students are demonstrating any of the area in green, that's when staff should be recognizing them with verbal praise. Some schools that are PBI schools will use some kind of a reward system where you will have tickets. We use tickets. They're called Bluejacket Pride tickets. And the Bluejacket Pride tickets we look like are blue tickets, and staff carry them, and then they can give those to students and say, thank you for being productive. Thank you for being respectful. Thank you for being responsible. Thank you for being safe. And then say, you were safe when you walk slowly in the hallway with your arms at your side on the right side of the hallway. We really appreciate that. Then the below the line behaviors, those are the behaviors that might be considered, we would consider to be more minor behaviors. And then the major behaviors would be the ones that we would consider a major ODR form. So these are the examples of our referral forms that we've used over the years. And so as you collect data, you want to make sure that you have more data collected. And so as you can see, we went from the green one to a much more specified one, which is the purple ODR form, which helps us then collect. We put the data into PBIS has a Swiss program that you can, as a school, can use. We use our Skyward system, which is our student management system, and all of the information that is contained in the purple referral form that you see there is then inputted by an instructional assistant or a paraprofessional. So the next question is, okay, you're collecting all this data. Now what? Okay, so here's what we do. So this is a sample of some of the data that we collect. So you can do it by the month. So how many ODRs are you getting each month? You can look at incidents. So how many bus referrals are you getting? How many fights are you having? Then you can also do it by location. So where are things happening? Are they happening on the bus, the cafeteria, the classroom? And as you can see, if you just look at location there, you can see that in this particular piece of data that I pulled, that classroom was where a lot of things were happening. So again, going back to the teachers and saying, what aspects of your classroom expectations do you need clarity on, so we can address that. And the other area that you see there that had a lot was the bus. And so again, as part of the bus referrals from the bus driver, the ODRs from the bus driver, it's reteaching the expectations. And for most of the students in my building, most bus referrals are the inability for them to stay seated, to move around the bus because they want to go talk to their friend that's in seat 15, and they're currently sitting in seat 3. So that just gives you an example. And we also do referrals by hour. And obviously the area that has the most, a lot of that comes from the default setting in Skyward, which is also helpful for you because it does tell you, for example, bus referrals. Some of those things happen either right away, or the time stamp on there is such that it would set a certain time. So again, knowing that for us, a lot of things were happening between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon meant that that was some area that we needed some focus and attention on in terms of what we're doing in our school at that time, making sure that students are staying engaged. So very helpful. So we look at a lot of data. We look at our behavior data. We also look at attendance as part of the North Star report and some of the other reports that you get from the Minnesota Department of Education. One of the areas that's a focus area is attendance. And so we track attendance. I'll look at that as well. We look at our behavior data, again, which I just showed you. We also take a look at our academic data, because our academic data also tells us how many kids are on track, how many kids are above or at grade level, below grade level, because we've obviously found a connection between academic, behavior, and attendance, that there is a correlation or connection between all three. And so again, if we can help take a kind of a three-pronged way to resolve it, it makes life a whole lot easier. We also do the Alveus and the Sabres. These are screeners that we do to see, for example, if we have bullying, if we have any issues with Sabres. It's done to see if we had people that have specific behaviors or if there's concerns. It's a screener for us to help with, get some information on behaviors. The Alveus one also helps us because if there are certain areas where bullying is happening, then we can direct our resources and training in those areas. So this is just an example of staff. We've shared some data and the staff are kind of sitting down and reviewing and talking about ways that they can address that. So one of the things we like to do is, here's a problem, what do we want to do about it? And so again, it's getting staff involved. We do this as part of our faculty meetings. Once a month at faculty, we talk specifically about behavior, attendance, or academic data. And then we have staff analyze issues of concern and come up with ideas and suggestions on their own to help guide the PBIS team, as well as me, the principal, on how to move forward. The next step in that is, as I mentioned before, is some kind of a reward or recognition system. And so we use a system where students can earn tickets. There's basically 3 ways schools can handle the reward or recognition. One way that I would say probably about half the schools, maybe a little more, they use like a ticket system where students get a ticket from a teacher, recognizing them along with praise. There are districts that do not believe in giving out tickets. So for them, it is strictly the positively stated praise. So it would be things like, I liked how you were walking on the right side of the hallway with your voice off and your arms at your side. Thank you for doing that. You make our halls a safer place. And for some schools, that's what they want. They want that positive interaction, and they don't necessarily do the reward like a ticket. And then the third way is that you can do that virtually, and that students, teachers can say, you know, what's your name? And then they can enter into a virtual reward thing where they can earn points. And then they can, at the end of the year, they can do those points for something. So lots of different ways. We chose to do the ticket approach as an elementary school. That was what we decided to do. And so we have a couple of different types of tickets that we hand out. The Bluejacket Pride tickets are the blue tickets that are given for students demonstrating specific expectations. We also have orange tickets. We learned in 2016 that a fairly significant but still minor percentage, but still significant enough for our team that we needed to address it, is we were having some issues with behaviors and not showing Blue Jacket pride when there were guest teachers in the room. So we've now empowered our guest teachers when they see students being very successful or demonstrating Blue Jacket pride, they can reward students. And then we do a monthly drawing for students. And we have an all-school assembly once a month. And that is where we really, really praise and recognize students for demonstrating our character traits or Blue Jacket pride when we have guest teachers. And we also have Ride with Pride tickets that bus drivers give out. And those, of course, are kind of that yellow color that representing a school bus. And again, the change is the drivers then can give those to students as they're leaving the bus saying, thank you for riding safely today. I really liked how you stayed in your seat the entire bus ride. That's a very important attribute because for many students in my school, the idea of having to stay in seat 3 the entire way and not going back to seat 14 to talk to their best friend is challenging. So a good way to positively reward students again. And then again, just like with those, we do a monthly drawing and then we recognize not only the driver, but the student, but we also recognize the driver. There, I said it correctly. So every week, students earn blue tickets, obviously, and the blue tickets then get put into the thing that is on your left there. That is each of the grade levels. And so every Friday, we do our drawings, and students can put their tickets in there. There's also the school bus tickets are on the top there. So anybody who got tickets from their bus driver, you can put those in there, and that's what we do for our weekly drawing. We also behind that in that kind of that tannish blue colored box is where we put all of our sub sensations, we call them, for students who demonstrate Blue Jacket pride when there's a guest teacher. And then after every week, all of our blue tickets we put in there. And then when that thing is full, then the students get to vote on an all school reward. And this year we had 16,720 tickets through March 5th, which was our last day of school for this school year. And the students, when they got to 15,000, earned a reward, which was to be held in May. Obviously, that was not held, so to be continued. So this is just an example of how we do it. Each week we determine, okay, we're going to do a drawing this Friday. So triple treat, front of line, or sit with a friend. The next week is wear a hat day next week, Blue Jacket Pride tickets, might get a beach ball that week. And so we've determined as a team what we're going to give each week as rewards. And then that is shared with students so they're aware of what it is. We do that every Friday. So some of the prize options, lunch with Mr. Zebarth, that would be me, extra recess, front of lunch line, triple treat, technology break. These are all things that are available. One of the things that we did this year, which was very popular, is teacher treat, and which meant that the teacher got to pick something that all students who won that week got to do in their classroom. And for most of them, their preference was to have lunch with their classroom teacher. School store. So we implemented this 2 years ago where we give students choice. I meet a couple times a year with student groups, different groups of students to talk about what's working, what's not working with our PBIS program. And students said what they really liked is they really liked having choices. And so we talked to them, they asked about a school store. So now you can either enter our weekly drawings or save your tickets and purchase things at the school store. And so that's what that is. Another part of our PBIS program is we do morning announcements. These morning announcements allow us to give student voice because the students do the announcements, but it's also a way for us to continue to explicitly state our school expectations and to recognize and reward students for doing that. So we do the Pledge of Allegiance. Each classroom gets assigned a week and they lead the school in the Pledge of Allegiance each morning. Again, part of our goal as a school is to get student voice in part of managing and running the school. So every classroom in our school gets at least 1 week where they as a class lead the school in the pledge. Very popular thing. And this is, we take applications from our students to do the morning announcements. And the PBIS team reviews those applications, and we have a rotating list of students who then videotape and film the announcements. And then those are played in the morning right at the start of our school day. And so here is an example of some of our announcements that we've done. This was from May 8th, 2019, but just gives you an example. The students do the announcements, it's shared, and they just have a great time doing that. We also have gone to monthly assemblies to help celebrate our explicit expectations that we have for students, and we recognize them. This is where we also do our Ride with Pride and some of those other key sub-sensations where we recognize those things through the whole community. We also do our one weekly drawing, obviously, for the month. One of the 4 that we do each month, we do it live. And then the students who win then get to do an activity in front of the entire school. And so the teachers plan those out. So basically, their assemblies have gone from being kind of sporadic and planned by this crazy principal to scheduled monthly, but still led by the crazy principal, to now led by teacher teams. And the principal still is involved in many ways, usually involving the principal either wearing something, putting something on him, or some other way when they've earned an incentive. And then we've created a seating chart. So all of our students are kind of in a half circle, and we have space then to celebrate, and all of the things happen. And we basically do our assemblies following the structure of a morning meeting to kind of give some guidance to or some structure based on our responsive classroom practices. And so we do some sharing, we do some celebrating, we do a greeting. So all of those things happen, and all students then, not only are they sitting, but they are also actively participating. So this is just a picture of what it's like. We ask students to show 5, which is a way to get attention. So you can just see students doing that. And as you can see, they are all seated, and it is a large mass. Obviously, this was before the era of social distancing. And some of the activities that there's the person presenting to you being taped to the wall, and then having some various substances applied to him. Lots of great things happening. The other picture is teachers over Halloween were made to be mummies. And so then, as part of our PBIS team, we also plan things to create spirit within our school. So those are just some lists of some of the things that we do as an elementary school, for also not only for our students, but also for our staff. A couple of highlights to this note is the acts of kindness. We took that up a couple notches this year and took out acts of kindness throughout our community. We wrote on sidewalks in some of our grocery stores and some of our other community gathering places. And then we also were lucky enough to be able to participate with Starbucks and Caribou to write kind words that our students actually got to draw on them, and then those were given out to people in our community. We also have started something called a payday breakfast. So we get paid twice a month on Fridays. So every payday, one of the teams in our building provides breakfast for the rest of the building. And that has become the most amazing event because everybody tries to outdo each other. It's absolutely phenomenal, and it did not cost us anything. And this is kind of an example of the bulletin board that we have. We have like baby pictures of our staff when they were younger, asking students to identify, see if they can figure out. Also then different awards or recognition, positively stated sayings. And this is an example of our homecoming spirit days, just to kind of show what we do. And we have the royalty come. And then we do Red Ribbon Week, again, kind of combining a number of different attributes as part of our PBIS program. And this was a kindness breakfast club, and these are students then that were pledging to demonstrate kindness and to give kindness throughout the world. And many of these students ended up putting kindness, using chalk outside of Colburn's grocery store in Isani, very, very popular. So lots of random acts of kindness. We also believe in giving student voice. So when the students earn an incentive, they actually get to vote. So what you see here is pictures of students voting for what they would like. We actually got some voting booths, and we were able to have them sign up just as if they were voting. We had some volunteers do that. And this is what they chose. They got to pick, and they chose a movie. So what we did is we had a number of movies available throughout our building. The students got to sign up for what movie they wanted, and we had 0 issues. And this is just, again, some of our end of the year celebrations. This is pictures you see here is when we had our bingo day, which was very, very popular. We did all school bingo. We've also done inflatables, and we've also done a movie choice. This is an example of some of our end of the year celebration. We have various activities, payday breakfasts. These are all of the things that our PBIS team does to kind of create a positive school culture. And so the training that we do with students is we do it back to school. So this just gives you an idea of the schedule that we might do for PBIS expectations. So all of the students come down and they practice and learn about the expectations in the lunchroom, recess, hallways, entering and exiting the building. And we do these trainings in the fall, and then we do a follow-up training after our winter break. And this is, we have a video, we don't have time to show this, but it's in the slides that I shared with you. And this is just showing hallway expectations. Again, we made the movies as a visual so students know what to expect in the hallways versus what maybe was happening in the past that wasn't such a great thing. And then bus safety is another part of our PBIS program. And that gets where we do the Ride with Pride. And then this is, again, another video that we did about entering and exiting the building. We've learned that visuals are very helpful for elementary students. So one of the things that most schools, when they're implementing PBIS, do is they will create some kind of video to help demonstrate some of those first expectations. And then those are played throughout the school. And then each fall we do training for our staff. And we always talk about building positive relationships and the importance of that. And then this is just an example from the 2018-19 school year of Bluejacket Pride. And so basically what we did with our staff is we told them, what is PBIS, why PBIS in our district, what does it look like at our school, how we recognize students, and the schedule for our celebrations. This just gives all of our staff, again, a complete understanding of PBIS each year, because we always have staff turnover, and this way everybody gets the same information. It's all explicitly taught to them. So now everyone is on board before the first day of school. And then we also have PBIS, and this is just an example of the slide that we share with our staff that's from Minnesota PBIS. And we also make sure we talk about that it's a 3-tiered system. Again, I shared this with you earlier, but I just wanted to show you the importance of it. We also, again, talk to our staff about these specific examples of why we as a building do PBIS. Because even though we've been doing it, every year is a new year in education. And every year you got to go back and make sure people are on board and that everyone is in agreement. And then the 3 major components we make sure that we as a building are doing is we're teaching and we're intervening and we're recognizing. So teach to everyone, intervene when needed, and recognize when the expectations are being met. And there's many different ways to recognize. It can be praise, it can be virtual rewards, or it can be, as I described, tickets and more of an external reward like that. So the key thing about PBIS, again, is consistency, and it's making sure that you have expectations, that you train, that you involve, you interpret, you implement, and that you hold yourselves accountable. And cannot emphasize enough the importance of PBIS. in creating consistency. Students and staff, as much as they sometimes don't always agree or don't necessarily want to admit it, that consistency makes everyone feel safer, and it makes them feel like they really understand what's expected. And so one of the things that we like to remind our staff is that Bluejacket pride happens everywhere. And it needs to be shown and recognized in all areas of our school, not just classrooms. And so it's not just when I'm in the classroom, but when I'm in the hallway, when I'm at lunch, recess, entering and exiting the building. Many times in elementary schools, students develop very close relationships with their classroom teacher, and they can demonstrate expectations that their classroom teacher has, but when they leave the classroom, making sure that that sticks with them regardless of where they're at is one of the things that we like to focus on. And so again, just kind of reviewing, what does Bluejacket pride look like? Again, helping staff understand what we look for in the hallway, what we look for when we enter and exit the building, what do we look like, what does it look like in the bathroom, recess, lunch, and again, we train staff, and then we also train the students as well. And again, the main focus we have is active supervision and making sure that their classroom matrix and what's happening in their classroom gets communicated. So for example, if a student does have a major behavior and they do get to the student resource room and we need to talk to them about their behavior, we can say, what part of your classroom expectations were you not able to meet, in order to help guide them as they move through. And again, we go through the kinds of behaviors, and this is really important. The green is what we celebrate. The yellow is where we need to intervene. And then the red is where it usually means something that will be figured out or fixed, or we'll have someone from the resource room involved. And we also talked about what ones are managed by the staff. So the staff know that these are things that they are going to be addressing. And then we also talked about these are the ones that the office manages. So teachers know that they don't have to manage, for example, bomb threats. And again, this is the resource room referral. We talked about that. And then obviously we've moved it to the purple one. Lunchroom and recess staff. And that is basically reminding staff that the purpose for the lunch and the recess staff is to supervise down there. And then again, we remind staff for the tickets. We've talked about that. One of the things that's really important is we've also shared with staff how to do that, how to actually do the guidelines. And so I think that's really, really important. So I'm going to quickly go through that. And again, I'm just showing you kind of our monthly schedule that we have for staff on what happens each month. And last, I just want to close with what does the PBIS team do in your school? So if you were to be PBIS, what exactly do you do? And that just shows you evaluate data, you generate reports, you look for trends, you support team members, you assist in building the school culture, you share news, assemblies, drawings, and then staff events. And then again, we talk about staff culture, and we share with everyone who's on the team so everyone knows. And then I've included here kind of resources that we have for PBIS for people who are interested. And this is just some information that on Twitter, PBIS Min, and then on Facebook, there's also a PBIS Min site. And thank you very much for your attention today. I really, really appreciate it. And I will, if you have any questions or anything else, there is, I'm sure there's some information that was sent to you, but I am available on Twitter at Mark Zebarth. And I also have an email, and that is mzebarth@c-ischools.org. And we're much willing to continue the conversation if anybody's interested. So thank you everyone for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was wonderful. Thanks for sharing everything. There's a lot of great comments on how helpful that was. So just so everybody knows, as we're transitioning to the next session, we now have a break until 11 o'clock. And then our next presenter, Dan Torres, will be presenting on implementing PBIS with a native voice with this same link. So if you want to view that presentation, you just stay in this Zoom room or take a break and come back, whatever you want to do. The other session with the other link will be picking up the pieces, how to measure PBIS implementation, fidelity outcomes when interruptions occur. So if you would like to view that session, now is your time to switch. We will start the next session at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Hi, Erin. It's Lauren Spar.
Hello.
Hi. Do you have any information about CEUs? I saw that somebody asked about that.
I'm going to defer that question to, oh, and I see that question too. Sorry, I'm looking at both. I'm going to defer that question to Mary.
Okay, and we've had some stuff come out in the, sent to our mailbox. When you do the evaluation,